Good morning. On Friday, BC teachers proposed a reasonable solution to end our strike and resolve this long dispute. Binding arbitration is a fair, workable, and pragmatic plan to open schools and get children back into classrooms with their teachers. On Saturday, after several hours of discussions between myself and mediator Vince Reddy and BCPC's lead negotiator Peter Cameron, the government rejected the idea. The BC Liberal government gave some weak excuses, but not a single legitimate reason for saying no. If it's a matter of policy, they can change it. You are the government, after all. If it's confusion over the details, ask Peter Cameron. He was in the room with Vince Reddy and I for several hours going over every single detail on Friday as well as Saturday. The BC Liberal government's rejection of binding arbitration was a political knee-jerk reaction. Binding arbitration remains the fastest and most effective way to end this strike, to reach a fair settlement and get students back in classrooms. Today, we're giving government another chance. BC teachers are prepared to stand behind our plan and put it to a vote. Christy Clark and Peter Fassbender have been asking for a vote. Now they will get it. The BCTF will put the question to teachers on Wednesday, September 10th. Teachers will be asked if they are prepared to end the strike if the government agrees to our binding arbitration proposal. The BCTF executive is recommending a yes vote. Our proposal for binding arbitration standing issues on compensation, benefits, preparation time, negotiate a new fund to improve the learning conditions for our students now, but we are willing to put that to arbitration as well if that makes it easier for government to get to yes. There's, however, one important move the government needs to make first. The BC Liberals must drop E80, their attempt to negotiate out of 2 past Supreme Court losses and any future decisions to a higher court. Teachers will never bargain away our charter rights or a potential award from the courts before it even happens. The BC Liberals want to continue the inadequate funding levels of the Learning Improvement Fund, which has not addressed the learning needs of our students. It keeps just re-announced money. They want the status quo to supersede and replace what was illegally stripped from our collective agreements, first by Christy Clark in 2002. Last spring, they applied for and want to stay pending their appeal. And now they're trying to undo a BC Supreme Court decision before even the process starts. They can't have it both ways. It's time for this government to drop the single biggest hurdle to a fair settlement and say yes to arbitration. Leave the matters currently before the courts, to the courts, and allow all the other matters for compensation, benefits, and preparation time to go to binding arbitration. This proposed framework for settlement is online for all to read at bctf.ca. BC teachers are ready to vote. A yes vote will end the strike and open schools. All the BC Liberal government has to do is say yes. Yes to binding arbitration. Thank you.
Given what the government said on the weekend about this, do you expect this to actually work?
Well, we're committed to this process. We're committed to what we have said. And we're hoping that government changes their mind. And this is a next step for us to show that we're serious with our proposal. And, I'm hoping that government does the right thing here. Their chief negotiator, in an article just recently, admitted that government hasn't moved. So how can you get a deal when one side won't compromise? So here is the easiest solution. Let's put it to binding arbitration and let an arbitrator decide what a fair settlement would be.
What did Vince Reddy say on the weekend about this? Was he receptive to that idea?
In terms of what Vince Reddy said is that, and I'm not going to comment on that piece directly, that the weekend was spent trying to develop a framework for settlement. We put out our proposal. We talked about our proposal. Peter Cameron knew what our proposal was on Friday afternoon, and we spent hours on Friday and some hours on Saturday. And it seems like they had already rejected the idea even before we started talking about it. For us, it is an easy solution. All government has to do is say yes. Yes to binding arbitration. But yes, they have to drop E80 for sure and let the court process wind its way through. And government has said previously, let the court process things before the court, let that happen. So that's what we're saying.
So Jim, if you're letting the class size composition issue be dealt with in the courts, does that not mean what's left is wages and benefits, that is the reason why teachers are on the lines and students aren't in the classroom?
No, actually, part of our proposal is the Learning Fund. And when we made that compromise position back in June, again, it was us trying to propose a solution because we know the other issue, the illegal stripping of our collective agreements by this government, was before the courts. And people have been saying, well, let the court process happen. So we looked at that and said, okay, that's an important part for us. We've won that twice now, and now it's at the appeal court. So the courts will determine in terms of the actual collective agreement provisions on limits. But in the meanwhile, we know we have to address the learning needs of our students. And that's why we proposed the fund as an interim measure to deal with it. And that's why our members have been standing on the line strong, receiving no pay, making sacrifices, and receiving no strike pay.
Peter Cameron's letter to the minister basically explaining why he was rejecting binding arbitration said that you never did put a written proposal forward. I know you mentioned many hours, but I mean essentially what he's saying in that letter is that he feels the TF was never truly serious about binding arbitration. So I mean I'm wondering what you say to those who are insinuating that this has been a face-saving move on your part.
So what I hear you saying, and paraphrasing Peter Cameron, the reason they're rejecting binding arbitration because he didn't have a written proposal when we spent hours talking about our proposal and trying to move solutions forward. We worked very hard this week and we again proposed a solution, and government continues to say no. Peter Cameron admits government has not moved. We keep trying to find a way forward, and we will keep doing that. This is the easiest way forward. They have issues at the table. We have issues at the table. Drop E80. Let the court process happen. We'll work on the fund to support the learning needs of our students. That can be arbitrated too. Let everything go to arbitrator, binding arbitration. Both sides will put their proposals together, speak to an arbitrator, and arbitrator will determine what's fair. Easy solution after 18 months of bargaining and government's refusal to be bargaining in the summertime.
Can you clarify that vote that you gave us a date? Are you saying that you're going to put it to a vote either way or only when they say yes?
No, we're putting it to a vote this Wednesday, September 10th. And we're putting our proposal to our members about binding arbitration, dropping E80, and let the courts decide the other piece. So that's the vote that our members are going to be voting on Wednesday.
When will we have results from that?
We'll have results of that sometime Wednesday night. Usually, it takes us to at least 8 or 9 o'clock before we get the results in from our locals. So sometime Wednesday night we'll be giving you the results of that vote.
So this vote is clearly a tack to put some more pressure on the government, saying, listen, we have the teachers behind us when it comes to this binding arbitration. But clearly their message has been they're not interested in binding arbitration from what we've heard from them. So what's next? You've tried mediation, we've kind of gone negotiation, we're at binding arbitration.
Again, it's us proposing solutions, and we think this is the fastest, easiest solution right now. And what we're saying by the vote is that we're already going to be saying yes if government agrees. And so we're making the decision on yes before waiting. So we have the yes vote, then all it's going to take is for government to say yes.
But they won't say yes, so what's next?
Well, we got to be optimistic. Well, I'm hoping all of you also talk to trustees, talk to MLAs, talk to others about getting government to say yes. During the election, Ms. Clark talked about yes to all sorts of things. Yes to deals, yes to LNG, yes here, yes there. All we're asking is yes to binding arbitration. Pretty simple.
if you take E80 off the table, how far apart are you realistically when it comes to, I mean, I know wage disputes at 1%, the contract term is 1%, but you guys are still asking for the signing bonus. Like, what are we actually looking at when we're talking about the distance between the two parties when you take that one aspect off the table?
If there's an agreement on that aspect, and they say yes to the courts determining what's before the courts, and what we're saying is all those other items, let's put to binding arbitration. And it's simple. An arbitrator will then determine what's fair in terms of the proposals government has and the proposals that we have. And it is about compromising, and we've been compromising. We've put all sorts of compromises to the table in June, 2 weeks ago when we met with Mr. Reddy on the weekend? And now Mr. Cameron finally admits government hasn't moved, something we've been saying for a long time. And so, let's put it to arbitration.
Your members have been asking for a vote to go back to the classroom for quite a while. I know a lot of them have sent letters to you. Is this not a wasted question? Because we know the government's going to say no. So is this not a wasted question? Should you not be actually asking them if they want to go back to the classroom regardless of binding arbitration?
Actually, this is a very important question because we put this proposal out on Friday. And what we did in that proposal is we want government to say yes. And when they say yes, we said that we would then recommend it to our members. So what we're doing right now is recommending to our members right now. And so we would have the vote if government says yes. That's what's important. It's an important vote. And our members, we always go back to our members with votes. And this is the one that's crucial because we need a resolution to this dispute that involves bargaining. Arbitration is an avenue open to in terms of the bargaining table. I've been asked that question many times previously, whether we would look at that option. And I've always said it's an option. We've made the decision. All government needs to do is say yes. And, you know, Ms. Clark said with the truckers dispute, you know, it's better to get a deal than a fight, so let's get that deal.
Are you willing to agree to any fiscal parameters around the arbitration?
I think what we need to be able to do is let's look at what the proposals are. And I know there's been comments about what's fair, and we will make those arguments about what's fair. We will look at what's been agreed to, and we can put that there. And then an arbitrator will determine that. Because we know that even in the current proposals, it's not what they seem in terms of what other public sector have settled for.
Have you had any discussions with other union members about a possible general strike?
I haven't had any discussions. I've heard the call for some form of general strike. That call always goes in terms always comes at some point in time in a major dispute to support each other, and I'm sure there are people talking about that.
You're asking the government to say yes. Mike DeYoung today is saying that if they say yes, that's going to cost every property owner $200 more per year. So are you asking the general public who is watching this to accept a tax hike?
Well, you know, it's about choices. It's about priorities for this government. When we look at what we have on the table in terms of the education fund to meet the learning needs of our students, when we look at what we have on the table in terms of preparation time, when we look at that, we're talking about $3 a day per student over a 5-year term. It's very affordable. And then when you look at government choices that they've made in the past about spending, and you know, I use California Power. You know, it's the most recent example, $750 million to a private power company to settle a dispute. Minister Bennett said, that's a good deal for British Columbians. $225 million in a fund to start addressing some of the learning needs of our students is not a good deal for British Columbians. We say it is.
So do you believe it can be settled without a tax hike?
Absolutely.
Jim, if the government say yes to binding arbitration and there is a deal done by binding arbitration, does that still require a vote within the TF members? If
Oh.
there is, there will leave a room for your members to say no to binding arbitration then.
Well, absolutely. When you negotiate a deal and the bargaining team recommends a deal to the executive recommends a deal to the membership, it's always up to the membership whether they ratify a deal. So our members will always get a final vote on what an actual deal is. In terms of what we've proposed, in terms of binding arbitration, the vote that we're proposing right now on Wednesday is that members agree in terms of that we will stand down the strike. When you put it to binding arbitration, then we know that what comes out of an arbitrator, that would be the settlement.
But then if there is a deal coming out from binding arbitration, and then what if the members vote no to that? That means that that deal won't be binding then.
Okay, now I understood. I misunderstood some of the first part of your question. That's why it's so important in terms of the vote that we're having right now, in terms of the question. So we've asked government, drop E80, let the court process wind its way through and deal with those things that are in front of the court. We win, it gets restored. And now everything else goes to binding arbitration. And we know, are there risks for us in binding arbitration? Absolutely, we know that. And so what the settlement will be is what the arbitrator will deem as the fair settlement for our teachers. And that's the commitment that we're making in terms of binding arbitration.
Is contract length an issue?
Well, currently contract length is an issue. I mean, we've proposed a 5-year term. They've proposed 6-year term. Thank you.